Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on the Bare Bones Yoga Podcast, Conversations for Yoga Teachers. My name is Karen Fabian. I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. I'm a yoga teacher and educator, and my goal here is to provide you, the yoga teacher, and other listeners with interesting, compelling content designed to pique your interest in teaching, help you grow as a teacher, and support you on your path to sharing this wonderful practice with your students. I've been teaching for over 14 years, and through my classes, workshops, online courses, books, and other content, I focus on the anatomy of yoga and how teachers can learn this complex subject and present it to their students in an understandable way, all designed to help them bring more impact to their teaching. Even though we're not in the same room, I want you to envision for each episode that we've sat down for tea in a cozy coffee shop. Some days we'll talk about technical teaching topics, while some days we might have a teacher friend join in on the conversation, and other days we'll face some of the personal challenges that can come up when we take on the journey of being a teacher, knowing that the more authentic we can be, the more we can impact others. For more information about my products and programs and to contact me at any time, just visit my website at barebonesyoga.com. Let's get into today's episode.
Hi, everybody. Hi there. This is Karen Fabian, and I want to welcome you to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I am your host, and this is episode 41. I want to start out this episode by first telling you that I'm recording it from a hotel room in Irvine, California, and I'll get to why I'm here in a few moments. But I just wanted to mention that in case the quality of the download is, or the audio is a little different. It actually might be a little bit better since I'm in what hopefully will be a fairly soundproof room, not like my normal recording when I'm in the apartment in Boston and there might be some traffic sounds in the background. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I am so grateful that you have taken some time out of your day to listen to this podcast. And along those lines, I wanted to ask you if you could take a moment after listening to the podcast today to post a review on iTunes. And the reason I ask for this is because I had an opportunity recently to share my podcast with some people, and they had some question about whether or not people were listening to it because they looked on iTunes and saw that there weren't a lot of reviews. And I don't usually really pay that much mind. Although in order for me to have opportunities to share the podcast with other teachers and other people, sometimes it's helpful to have some reviews just so that people who have never listened can get an idea from listeners as to what they think about the podcast. And I will say, and I definitely want to give a huge shout out to anyone out there who has sent me an email over the past year and a half or so that the podcast has been up and running, actually a little over a year, and sent me some really wonderful thoughts about how much they enjoy listening. And I love getting those emails, and I always respond with gratitude for them. The only challenge is those emails just come to me and no one else can see them. So if you have a minute and you could write a review, I actually don't love asking for reviews. It doesn't sit that great with me in my energetic body. Although from a business side of things, it is a great way for others to know what you think about it. So if you have a moment or two and you can leave a review, I would really be grateful. So let me tell you why I am recording this from Irvine, California. I've been out here for the past 3 days for an event called Business by Design. And this event is an entrepreneur's workshop. And when I say workshop, it doesn't even encompass it. It's really a retreat. The only reason I kind of hesitate to say retreat is because we're in a hotel room, and when I hear the word retreat, I oftentimes think about a faraway place or a hot place or a beach kind of place. So just for kind of easy purposes of explaining, it is a 3-day live event for entrepreneurs, and there are 600 people here from all over the world. Matter of fact, the first day we had a polling to find out where people had come from and who had come from the longest way. And, Sydney, Australia and Singapore, it's just unreal. And this event is hosted by James Wedmore. And James, over the past couple of years, has become a virtual business mentor of mine. And that basically means I never met him in person, although I have been an avid reader of his writings, listener to his podcast, which is called the Mind Your Body podcast or Mind Your Business podcast. And I have recently invested in his online program for entrepreneurs called Business by Design. And so along with that program, you get admission to this yearly live event. And, I don't often speak so much about what I'm doing behind the scenes to develop my entrepreneurial skills. And I really do think of myself as an entrepreneur because I'm an independent yoga teacher. I don't own a studio. And in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to have a lot of different skills, a lot of what they never really taught me when I went and got my advanced degrees in kind of traditional education. And because a lot of what I do is reach out and support teachers who are all over the world through my virtual products and programs, it's really, really helpful for me to have a business mentor who is well-versed in these kinds of things. And James Wedmore is the top of the industry. And so this year, actually on July 31st, I made a pretty significant investment to invest in his program. And it was something I wanted to do a year ago, and I put it off thinking I wasn't ready. And I felt ready this year. And so I invested in this program on July 31st. And with that came admission to this live event, which started on Sunday. Well, it really started on Monday. I flew out here from Boston on Sunday afternoon. And so for the past 3 days, the event ended about 2 hours ago. I have been immersed in personal development and tactical business strategic sessions with James and the 600 other people. And of course, we've had breakout sessions and Q&A sessions and panel discussions and keynote speakers and just a whole host of opportunities, plus all the casual meetups that you have when you come to an event like this to meet other people, find out what's working for them, and share your story and get support from them as to the challenges you're facing. And so here I am sitting in my hotel room about 2 hours out from the closing ceremonies. And I really wanted to take this opportunity to just kind of talk free form about some of the themes that came up. Because, when I think about life-changing events in my life, in terms of things that really, really touch me at a deep kind of inner core soul level, I think of two things so far. And I'm not talking about relationships or emotional kinds of things or things related to love or family. I'm talking about things that really shift your inner being. And the two things that come to mind are my first teacher training with Baron Baptiste in 2002 in Maya, Tulum, Mexico, and this training here with James Wedmore. And I really can honestly say with quite a high degree of confidence that just about everything else I've done in between, including graduating from college and getting my master's degree and various other trainings I've taken, they have not been as impactful in my inner being. They've definitely been things that I've attended and I've learned things and I've grown and I've cried and I've faced challenges. I'm talking about things that have opened my eyes to what I am truly able to achieve. And these two things are, by far the two most impactful events that I've ever attended. And I wanted to just take a moment just to share with you some of the common themes that came up. And, I wanted to start out with a story. There's a lot of these posts you see these days about what I would tell my 20-year-old self, or what I would tell my inner child, or what would I tell myself if I was, speaking to myself when I was a toddler, or maybe not a toddler, but you kind of get the idea. And I had an opportunity in 2017 to lead my own retreat in Maya Tulum, in Tulum, Mexico. And the resort, Amansala, is literally next door to Maya Tulum, which is the resort where I attended this first teacher training with Baron Baptiste that I referred to earlier. And so I remember when I got there for my retreat, leading my retreat, yoga retreat, I got to the resort, Amansala, and I stepped out onto the beach knowing that Maya Tulum was quote unquote next door, but I didn't really know what that meant in like beach miles. And so when I was standing there on Amansala's beach, I turned my head to the left, and literally right there, I could see ahead of me the huts of the Maya Tulum resort. And as I began to walk on the beach, making footprints in the sand and feeling the water on my feet, I could see the thatched roofs of the huts. And I know some of my listeners have trained with Baron and they have been to Maya Tulum. And so I know you can see this in your mind's eye as I'm describing it. And as I was walking towards those huts, I was having these flashbacks to who I was when I was there in 2002, and this was 2017 at the time, and what kind of person I was back then, and who I was being, and what were my fears, and what was I thinking I was capable of, and what was I knowing I was shying away from in my life, and what was I hoping to get out of the retreat, and all these different things. And when I finally reached the Maya Tulum beach and I stood there, I had this just massive sense of flashbacks to who I was at the time, mixed together with who I was in that present moment of May of 2017, and just feeling kind of a whole mix of emotions, not really regret, but just a feeling of the passing of time, a feeling of the potentiality of my own personhood, and things I had accomplished, and things that I knew I had yet to accomplish. And so I went on to lead my own retreat in that week ahead, and it was a wonderful time, and it was a beautiful experience. And kind of fast forward to about a year and a half ago, I was feeling really, really down in my business and in my life. And I was feeling like I was being sucked into this like web of negativity. And I started to reach out to books by authors I had not read before, by just literally going onto Google and just searching different books about neuropsychology and neuroscience in general, and getting unstuck. And, I came across, a couple of books. I started to dive into these books. And then I hired a neuroscience coach. And I think I've talked in earlier episodes. Some of my first few episodes have been about my work with Deb Elbum, who is here in the Boston area. So if you're looking for a neuroscience coach, email me, Karen@barebonesyoga.com, and I will tell you all about her. She's amazing. And I remember in my first call with Deb, because I never met her in person, I worked with her over the phone. She asked me kind of that general, tell me about yourself and why you are interested in working with me. And I launched into this whole story. Oh my God, the story about why I wasn't successful in my business. And I was thinking about going back to a regular job, corporate career that I had left to teach yoga. And I was going into all these different things about why I wasn't successful. And none of the things were things that I was taking responsibility for. All the things I was saying were things that had to do with how I felt I was being wronged, how I felt the quote unquote system wasn't being fair to me, how so-and-so had these opportunities that I didn't, and how this and that happened to this person, but it didn't happen to me, and on and on and on. And this went on for about maybe 15 minutes. And believe me, I had the story down pat because I'd been telling it to my parents and to my boyfriend, Ben, for many, many years. And they would just smile and nod. Actually, Ben wouldn't. He would scream and yell at me and say, I don't want to hear anything else about the yoga industry. It just makes me crazy. But my parents would like smile and they would kind of give me acknowledging, And Deb wasn't having any of it. And after about 15 minutes, she said, Karen, you need to stop. You need to stop making excuses and you need to stop with this story. Otherwise, we're never going to work together. We're not going to make any progress. And there's no sense in you spending your money on me. And it was in that moment that I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay stuck in old stories that had really defined me and really had the guts of those stories had become my firm beliefs. You know, those things were why I wasn't being successful in my business. Or I could let go of them. But to let go of them meant I was going to have to face why weren't things happening for me in the way I wanted them to happen. And I was terrified to do that because up until that point, that was my armor. Those were my excuses. And they didn't even seem like excuses to me. They seemed like very, very rational reasons why I wasn't getting the results I wanted in my business. And I realized right then and there that I had to do something different. And I dropped the story. And it reminded me of a night in like 2009 when I watched a documentary about factory farming. I can't remember the name of it. It was a very famous documentary at the time. And I literally sobbed the entire time I watched it. I woke up the next day and I stopped eating meat. And I didn't eat meat for probably 10 years. And it literally was like an immediate shift that I made. And although about a year and a half ago, I went back to eating meat occasionally, I still have a whole bunch of just thoughts about it and kind of self-restrictions that I very happily impose on myself. So I don't eat meat that much. Although the point was similar to my experience here with Deb, I just literally just cold turkey, I just dropped it. And so I tell you those two stories because, you know, I think they give you a sense, and I'm sure, you know, maybe even in your life, you can think about times when you've either had opportunity to look back on your life. You know, maybe you've gone back home and you haven't been home in a while, or you went back to your high school just randomly, or, you know, you were someplace that you hadn't been for many, many years. And so you had that sense of self-reflection, you know, and maybe you too have had a time in your life when you've had to face something and you've had to kind of step into your own power to save yourself, right? From yourself. And, you know, I'm sure if there's anybody listening out there who's gone through a recovery process, you know, sometimes that's called hitting rock bottom. And I certainly wouldn't describe my situation as rock bottom, but I would say psychologically it was pretty close to being in such a self-defeating mode that it was clear if I didn't make a change, I wasn't going to be successful. And so, you know, I think back to, you know, fast forward further to coming to this event on Sunday. And now that I sit here in the hotel room just 3 days later, and I think about all that I've realized in the past 72 hours, which sounds mind-boggling to me, but I can truly tell you that I am sitting here and just riffing this. I do not have this written other than a few notes. This is completely coming forth from my soul and unedited, unscripted, and not pre-planned. And what that says to me is I have once again shifted to a different level. I don't even want to really say next level because I think to some extent it is a leveling kind of thing, a higher consciousness, another level of potentiality. You know, I think just for right now, I just want to say another level of just being. And, of the notes that I did jot down before pressing record, I just basically jotted down some of the general themes and just some probing questions, some insightful questions that I want to pose to you to get you thinking about some of the things that I've been thinking about for the past 72 hours, because you weren't here with me, number one. And number two, I think the other reason I wanted to share this, especially with all of you, my community of podcast listeners that are most likely yoga teachers or other people in health and wellness, which is probably why you subscribed to this podcast or downloaded this episode or tuned in to listen. I wanted to make the leap to how some of these themes can affect us as yoga teachers, health and wellness professionals. How does this translate to what we do? So having said that, what I want to, and I'm just actually, just checking. I'm riffing so much. I wanted to make sure I was still recording, and I am. So I want you to, if you can close your eyes, I want you to close your eyes. Either way, maybe you're just walking and listening or driving and listening. I want you to think about, what is the impact that you want to make? When you think about the impact that you want to make, what do you see? What comes to mind? And along with that, when you think about the person you would need to be to make that kind of impact, what do you see? If there's one thing that and there's so many things that I've taken away from both of these events, but the past 72 hours, and I'm not going to go into obviously all of them, certainly not the tactical things I've learned on the business side, but I couldn't even possibly even right now articulate all the other things I've learned. Although some of the things that I have pulled away here, even just in this 2 hours post wrap up, is this idea that the power for all of what we want to be is so much more in our control than we realize. Our stories and our self-limiting beliefs hold us back in everything from the most mundane decisions to life-changing opportunities. Self-limiting beliefs that we have around everything from money to relationships to our personal appearance, our health, everything. And if we can just open our mind to the possibility of reframing things to see another way, another option is always within our control. But it's often that our past behaviors and our experiences tend to shape what we see as an option. The other thing I learned from being at this event is who we associate ourselves with, in large part, can determine our ability to reach the highest levels of our own potential. So I want to just take, I kind of threw out a whole bunch of things, and I want to just kind of go back now and just give you a couple of examples, or just things to just make these a little bit more real. So this idea that the power for all of what we want to be is so much more in our control than we realize. I want you to think about that from the perspective of, if each of us has the potential to be whatever we want, what do you think is often getting in the way of all of us doing whatever it is we want? The common thread, in general, throughout all of humanity is just this idea of, are we living to our fullest potential? And what oftentimes limits us, if everyone was living at their fullest potential, it'd probably be a very different world. When we start to think about, well, what's getting in the way, what oftentimes is the block are these self-limiting beliefs. And, a perfect example of that is the example I gave you about me before and about all of those stories, all of that baggage. And I can tell you, from being here at this event, I've had several interactions with people who shared, their stories and could see that their stories were in their way and were working to let go of those things. And it's really funny because I remember back in 2002 hearing about the idea of drop your story in my first training with parent. And I was too young and too naive, and I thought I had it all down to even really hear that, which is so funny because 2002 was a damn long time ago. And when I finally dropped my stories, it was a year and a half ago. And I'm not good at math, so I don't know how long that was, but it was a long time. And so part of me shares that with you to encourage you to get on it as fast as you can, because those stories that are holding you back are just wasting your time. Okay? So then this other idea that I shared, I said the possibility to reframe things, to see another way, to see that another option is always available, but our past behaviors and experiences tend to shape what we see, right? So if I say to you, hey, I have an opportunity for you to do this or this or this, or maybe I just say to you, I have an opportunity for you to do this. And you might see that and you might say in your head, oh, I can't do that. I could never do that, right? And you might throw out a couple reasons why you can't. What I would say is, are those denials of your being able to do the thing really coming from your true capacity to do it? Or is your vision clouded by other things like self-limiting beliefs? Another way to think of it is, if you're maybe stuck in making a decision about, should I do this or should I do that? What about if I asked you a couple of clarifying questions and we kind of teased out that there was another option available? And so now you've got door number 1, door number 2, and now you've got door number 3. What if we came up with door number 4? And I can tell you from my point of view and the perspective I've held for most of my adult life, I've typically seen things as option 1 or option 2. I have very rarely seen that there's other ways to think of things. And when I say the word reframe, that's what I mean. And there are so many opportunities for us throughout every single day to reframe things. And reframing is a neuropsychology or neuroscience term. And it's basically, using, the power of your mind, right? Your nervous system, your brain, to think about things in a different way, to come up with another option. Right? But we oftentimes don't do that because we're very stuck in rigid ways of thinking. And then this idea of, the last thing I said was, who we associate ourselves with in large part can determine our ability to reach higher levels of our own potential. So, what does that even mean? Well, look at who you hang out with, right? When I came to this conference on Sunday and I went to the first day on Monday, and after the morning session, we broke for lunch and I stood at a table with people that I'd never met before. And we started to talk about all these kind of strategic, tactical business techniques, internet business techniques. And it was a whole conversation around things that I never had with anybody before, because I was holed up in my apartment in Boston doing all these, kind of things to get the word out about my brand and who I wanted to help and what my mission was and what I could offer. I was doing it by myself. And sure, I was connecting with people online. I mentioned James Wedmore as a virtual mentor, but it's very different when you can meet with people in person. And so for the first time, I felt like I could speak the business speak that I had been speaking to myself really, really intently for the past 5 or so years. And in fact, for the past 2 years, I've been giving entrepreneurial workshops at a nonprofit in Boston called the Center for Women in Enterprise. And, people were packed in these workshops hearing me teach about all these techniques I had learned. And they were like, oh my God, you know what you're talking about. And how'd you learn all this? And it was really a self-taught tutorial process over 24 months, maybe even closer to 36, of really honing a lot of different techniques. And so here I was at this conference meeting with people in person that were in that world. And it was so great to be able to share ideas, to brainstorm, to troubleshoot. And then all of what comes when you're surrounded by people who want to better themselves, who want to make their lives better, who want to grow their impact, who want to make an imprint on the world, who want to leave a legacy, all those things. There is such power in being surrounded by people who are in that positive frequency. So in these final few moments, I want to make the pivot to how does this translate to teaching yoga, right? Because this is my podcast, Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I love to touch on these broader subjects because let's face it, if we are in the business of teaching yoga, we are in the business of making an impact. We are in the business of being our most powerful, authentic self. And I promise you, if you are trying to teach yoga and not deal and face with all of these things I'm talking about, it's really hard to be an effective teacher. And it's a lot harder because you're carrying around all this baggage. So if you're into this kind of conversation, know that you will always find this on my podcast. If you're just looking for all sorts of tactical stuff around how to teach and cueing and all of that, which is super important, you're going to get that too. Although I know that underneath all of that are these core issues. And that's really, really what I am trying to get to in all of the teaching that I do around the cues and the anatomy. It's all really just to get to these other things to help people tap into their true potential so they can be their best self. And when you're a teacher of anything and you're standing strong in your power, your natural radiance and authenticity is the best, magnet and teacher for your students. So how does this relate to teaching yoga? Well, let me ask you, how do you want to make an impact as a teacher? What do you see as your impact as a yoga teacher? And what are you doing when you're making that impact? Who are you teaching? Where are you teaching? What does it look like? If you close your eyes and see yourself being this impactful yoga teacher, what do you see? Right? Really get present to what that is, because in that visualization lies all the details, the blueprint for what you need to create in your life, in your life as a teacher. And when you think about that, what kind of person are you when you're making this level of impact? Because honestly, what we're trying to do is embody that person right now, rather than seeing that person as something we aspire to be, right? Like, remember when I said I went back to the beach and I stood on the Maya Tulum beach and I had that perspective. And that's what makes those go back moments so powerful, is that we have that perspective, but oftentimes when we're stuck, we lose perspective because all we can see is where we are right now. And where we are right now is where we don't want to be. We want to be someplace else, right? But in that visualization of who you want to be lies the opportunity to be that person right now. And that doesn't mean you'll have all the answers, right? For those of you out there who follow my podcast and you know, all my free content and download my worksheets and guides, and you know, maybe some of you listening are also teachers who have invested in my online course trainings on anatomy. You know, it doesn't mean you have all the answers. What it means is that you're willing to take the steps to add that, you know, knowledge to your framework. But the person who does that is someone who is living at that level. The person who doesn't do that is the person who's living in their self-limiting beliefs, right? It's the person who I was a year ago when I hesitated to come to this program because I said, I'm not ready. You know, I'm just not ready. I can't afford it. What value would that have for me? I'm not the kind of entrepreneur who's worthy of going to a conference like that. I'm not making enough money, all those things, right? And so the challenge that I leave you with is to take some time, sit in meditation, close your eyes, and think about what kind of impact do you want to be making as a yoga teacher? What do you need to be doing, or what would you be doing? And who is that person? And can you have faith and just be that person now and show up every day like that person and do what you need to do to fill in whatever gaps are there, but in the meanwhile, still stand confidently in your own power. So we've come to the end of this journey on this particular episode. And I want to leave you with a personal invitation. As some of you know, if you listened to my last episode, about a week and a half ago, I opened the doors to registration for my June retreat in Costa Rica. And this is an opportunity to travel, to practice yoga, to be in the sun, to relax, to invest in your health, and really, quite frankly, to do a lot of the things that we talked about today, to step into an opportunity where you can shift your being from one place to another, and it will absolutely have ripple effects on you, on the people who know you, people who love you, because when you go home, you'll be a different person. Just like I sit here in this chair 72 hours later, and I feel the power of the shifts that I've made, you'll feel those shifts too. And so I want to invite you to take a look at the registration page for this retreat. And I want to just kind of let you know that I've already had a couple of people sign up, so that I mention that because there are limited spots available, because I want to keep this to be a small group. And I also want to, you know, add in a differentiator. For those of you who have been to yoga retreats like me, you know that the accommodations can sometimes be up and down. This is a 5-star hotel. This is not a retreat center like you'd normally think of. And once you check out the event page and you see the Costa Rica retreat location, Bodhi Tree Yoga Resort, you can go on TripAdvisor and take a look at the 5-star reviews that people have left. The accommodations for this are going to be really exceptional. And along with that, the food, all of that's included. This is really a chance for you to shift on a deep level. And so I want to just leave you, it really kind of dovetails nicely with the theme of today's podcast. I want to just leave you with, just that opportunity to click the link, to look at the details of the retreat. And if you're interested, even in the least, I want you to think about this idea of reframing that I talked about before. And I want you to also just keep in mind this idea of, who do I need to be in order to take the leap to attend something like this, especially if you're out there just even right now discounting it for yourself. I just invite you to keep an open mind to what could be possible for you, knowing that even as you're hearing me talk, you may have already discounted it for a number of reasons, and I'm asking you to still stay open. And at a minimum, all you need to do is just send me an email and just say, hey, I'd like to hear more. In the meanwhile, I'll include the link to the retreat page on this podcast page. And you can also get it right on my website, which is barebonesyoga.com, right on the retreat page as well. So I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode. And I would love to hear your feedback. And I'd love for you to leave a review so others can hear what you think about the time you spent with me today listening to this podcast episode. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste.